Everything's fine. I don't complain about the heat. We live in Southern California. What do you expect? You just work through it. Air conditioner? No, you just work through it. It's good for your body. Shed fat. Big deal. Just gotta cool down every once in a while. You want some of that? You know that feels good, dude. Yeah. Just regurgitate the hot air, but it's blowing at you so it doesn't feel as bad. It's pretty nice. What's up, guys? Happy Monday. We're doing a Dakar update. I'm just trying to think about the last update. We were doing, like, I was filming stuff selfie, and then the progress, we just started just hammering on this thing. And then we got it to speed metal, and then we rolled it outside, and that was the last update for the Dakar Prototype. So that's what we're gonna do today. This is gonna be a broad update. Well, that's probably not a good word. This is gonna be a thorough update. There's a lot of stuff. We've been doing a lot of stuff, so we're just gonna go over a lot of stuff. This is an active construction site of Collins. So there's a lot of templates here. There's an instrument panel on the ground. There's a car on a chassis table. Does it need to be on a chassis table anymore? Absolutely not. Do we have room to put it anywhere else? Absolutely not. So it's on a chassis table. The next car that will go on here will probably be Joanne's truck, Joanne and Caleb, and then the all-wheel drive will go on here, unless we have two chassis tables, which would be nice, but we need to move some shit out of this place before we start on that many more projects. Anyways, big front radiator mount and bumper here. I'm not gonna get into this right now. Joey, what I'll have you do is I'm gonna have you go to the driver's side. We'll cover the inside right now. I'm gonna turn the light on. So here's how this one goes. Collins built this whole car. When you watch this, you know, and you go, wow, amazing work. Absolutely amazing work, incredible craftsmanship, Colin. Don't get it twisted. Where I come into this thing is I design everything. So it's really, I have a chemistry with Colin, all homo, of, you know, doing this with him in a way where I can come in. He's very good at reading my templates. He's very good at articulating what I'm saying to him into actual fabrication and executing. He is just as fast as I am, you know, and especially, you know, he would be even more proficient if he had that design sense. But really what's going on is I'm telling him every single little way things need to be, and then he kills it. And so that's where we're at. So really, I gave Colin this car, or this project as his. And, you know, the one thing I've done is I've welded everything on here. So I've came in, I'm gonna start cleaning this stuff out. I've came in, and when we need to, like before speed metal, I'll come in and just weld the shit out of everything, just because Colin's welding's good, but I wanna make sure that this one gets the best on every angle. And I can trust Colin for sure with the fabrication. And I was gonna relieve him of the sheet metal, and I'm like, well, it's gonna be complex. Like this area we're gonna talk about, it's gonna be complex. I'm gonna have to come in and do it. And I'm like, you know, at what point do I help this? Like, where do we get to the next level with developing, you know, my partner in crime here, and having him hone his skill set even higher. And so that's why, like, I've given him the sheet metal, and I don't even want to show you the door openings yet. We'll save that, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna at least get the floors. Last time this thing was outside, it was no floors. The seats were in, but it was like just a bare tube chassis. I don't think the spare tire was in. You can kind of see it was just a bare tube chassis. And we're like deep into the sheet metal game now. We're almost completely sealed cabin. Super hybrid style on this thing. What I mean by that is it's aluminum and steel. It is weld in plus removable, and it's all for a reason. The most fun panels to do on the truck or on a vehicle for me, and I think the easiest ones, are trying to fill out the front firewall. But what we needed to do with this is, so when you saw the outdoor or like the outside update last, the fuel cell may have been in there, but I don't know if you quite understand like how embedded that thing is. And it's really not unusual. The packaging with this is, it's not unusual for cars like this, especially like a rear, there we go, a rear engine, to have the fuel cell under the seats. People are always like, oh my God, under the seats. That's how it goes. Like, it's a sealed cab. Under the seats, and then through where your transmission tunnel would be. So if you see this is a tube connector here. There's a matrix of tube connectors. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then there's smaller tube connectors that go on like outriggers for the actual seat structure. Because under here is tube work that goes into the doors and the door sills. This whole thing has to come out because the fuel cell is completely tailored to fit, like, as you know, cusped in there as a hold down in a cradle, just like in the back of a Prerunner truck or a race truck. Like, you'd have a basket or a cradle for the fuel cell that's more often than not, if you're doing it right, it's like built to the shape of the fuel cell. And that's what's going on here. And so, you know, if you're sealing this cab, you can't just weld in, like you can see some of the panels with the heat marks here. That's all your weld-in panels, and those don't need to actually serve any function except for just being tin work that's welded in. All this stuff has to come out because to get to that fuel cell to service it, it has to come out, and then you need to seal it back in. And so it's been a design challenge, but it's been a great one. Like you see the harness bar that's poking out here, this guy, it's hot in here. That guy is removable, and then when this fuel cell comes out, like so, this whole cradle comes out, the side structures come out, and then this whole fuel cell is like a big, I don't know if you'd call it a capital T that's kind of skewed, and that has to go way up by the shock mounts and then like twist out of the door. How often do you need to service that thing? You usually don't. The pumps are going to be out, like remote pumps. They're not like inboard. Dude, does that fly? Did it just get knocked out? Oh yeah, he's not feeling good. He's still over there, but he's phased. The pumps are outside of the fuel cell, so it's, you know, really the bladder would need servicing if anything, or maybe you'd want to just clean it out. This could be every couple of years. And so no matter what, it does need to come out. It's not a lot, and this would be a process. If you wanted to get this fuel cell out, you know, you'd be pulling the carpet up, taking all the seats out, taking the instrument panels off, taking all the rear tin work off. You know, like it's built into the chassis, and that's fine. But really, to seal this, we need to lean into what is going to be the best way to still have a good seal without welding, like traditionally doing a silicone bronze full seam weld everywhere. The back panels back here, you can see those are traditional, you know, 16 gauge, cold roll, stepped, tacked, ready to weld. All this stuff, and this is pretty solid. There's not a lot of like, that one's a little tinny, but these are, even doing that, like what we did is we doubled like what your normal spread would be with the quarter turn fasteners. We doubled it. So, you know, if you had a 10-inch run, then instead you'd have a 5-inch run, and you'd have 3 buttons instead of 2. And it's like that throughout. So this thing has a really good capture on all of the tube work. What else is this going to get? We'll put like a form of Dynamat or something on the inside of all these panels where you won't see it. Under this is fuel cell bladder, and then it's a big old belly pan, so it's never going to see the elements. It's just going to be something where we can run Dynamat. That's going to absolutely have like a squish, solidify this thing, and then they'll put foam down, and then they'll carpet the whole thing. Like this whole car is going to be upholstered exactly like a exotic car, just Alcantara everywhere, stitching everywhere, no exposed panels or metal. It'll just be insane. So this has been the kind of the grind with all the interior sheet metal. One of my favorite features on the inside of this thing, or just in the sheet metal in general, oh, don't get stuck, is this tunnel. I thought about this and kind of envisioned this. You can see like there's a big chunk of rocker tunnel going through here. And what that is, you know, like with James Frontier, it's a very similar thing where it's got this chassis under here and there's no actual space for anything because it's the bottom of the sill or the rocker of the car, and then it's chassis, and it's just built right where we can get, you know, a full skid all the way through this. And then you can see the up in the guts here, that's where all the fuel cell goes. So now you got to think about rear engine, front radiator. Where do you run lines? Where do you run fluids, stuff that's flammable? You know, how do you keep that stuff safe through the cabin? With the Frontier, we did the hard lines, but with this, I'm like, we have an opportunity here. The trim, all of the trim that we have in here, which is upstairs now, dang it. We've incorporated, we'll have to do this on the next update just because I can see it all up there. All the OEM trim, like especially in the front door opening, we've retained all of it, from the headliner portions to the B pillar trim, to the rocker trim, some of the A pillar trim, all of like the factory OEM stuff. We have it where it's mounted. We cleaned some of it up where we filled some voids, like where the factory seatbelts were and stuff, with foam, sanded it. So it'll all be wrapped and it'll all be like molded and formed. It won't look like panels, so it'll be very OEM feeling in here. But the rockers, they require, like the trim piece that goes over here, the Range Rover trim piece, it's very deep. So it kind of hangs and hooks over the weather strip, and then it goes right about to this spot where my finger is here. So what we wanted to do is we thought about the carpet. You know, we can't just have like a cliff. We need some kind of radius to roll over. And then it already requires this much width. So why not run a tunnel through here that can house all of the lines, all of the, you know, there's power steering, there's fuel, and there's radiator lines. Now you go, oh my God, you shouldn't have all those together. They'll be fine. They're all in their separate stuff, and they'll be insulated and, you know, in the best plumbing you can get. So this whole portion on the passenger side is specific to housing the lines. Now, when you look up here, you see like the access panels. The other thing, like with running 3 access panels, is serviceability. When you have like a Prerunner and you have all, like we have factory, we're running this instrument panel still, right? So we're running the factory dash, the factory AC and blower. All that stuff lives in here. When you need to service this, and same with the foot controls and the steering, it's such a pain in the ass because you're usually finding yourself like upside down with your feet where your head would be in a seat. You know, complete 180 rotation, like buried in these cars. And like, what, you know, might as well do this while we can. So everything is removable. So this top one and this top one, the access panels, that's to access interior, access HVAC, all the stuff, service things. Then this lower one, so this is your trough in here for all your plumbing, you know, and it just feeds in there. And what this is this portion will help you kind of feed through there because it's sealed. It's not open to the chassis under there. It's got its own like passageway where it's safe. And same thing, if like a fire breaks out or something in there, there is no chance of it entering into the cabin whatsoever. We'll have fire suppression, but just the safety aspect there is at the highest level. So you can see some of the sheet metal in here. This big 10 piece, there's ports, right? So that hole over there, the oblong hole, and these guys, this is a little asymmetrical mounting surface here. But what that is this panel, and it's just hanging out here right now. Stuck on a tack. There we go. These ports made up with the weather strip on the instrument panel right here. So those guys, when you mount all the dash, they literally butt right into this firewall panel just like they would factory. And it seals it up. It's like a nice dust seal right there. So we can hook up the air conditioning and everything will just be like factory right there. This big, huge thing in the front that doesn't look proportional to the car is the bumper. Obviously that looks insane and doesn't make sense, especially with the wide angle. But really what this is this is to match, like when the wheels are on, tires are on, and then you actually start to look at the proportions of this thing and where the corner lights are supposed to go. I think this is just the same ones. Yeah. Well, you can see this one. You know, when you start to look at that, we plotted everything and we went off the ortho drawings, which is like the top view and the side view and the front view. We plotted out exactly where these lights need to be. We raised them up a little bit from factory, also pulled them forward a little bit from factory. So this bumper is relevant to the shapes that are required once this car has its fenders and its headlights and its grille all in, and it's the track width too. So I know it looks huge right now and it sticks out a little bit. It's very similar width to the rear bumper back there. I don't know if you can see it. But you know, you're seeing this cabin right now and the shell of this thing with no doors on it, which will give it another 4 to 6 inches on the outside. And then you got to think about the actual fender, like panels, the carbon panels that are going to be built, which are probably going to be a 12-inch bulge. So it'll all make sense. But we wanted this thing to be removable. You can see there's a couple pickups here. Hope this thing's focusing. So there's these pickups and there's going to be tube connectors here. We're just waiting on some special tube connectors from Igor. And you can see we just kind of still applied good design into all this stuff. There's still like a use, like this is a 120 tube. It's obviously a like a compound radius roll. And then there's some crunch tubes, like little 065s. So everything's still on a diet. Still shooting for 4,500 pounds wet. We're waiting on the radiator right now from Igor at Triton Race Coolers. It's a 4-core radiator. It's got a huge amount of surface area. It's a big, nasty thing that's got like a split in the middle. It's all billet tanks, billet inlet outlet with Wiggins, all the cool stuff. So I think we'll just save the talk on that for when it gets here. It should, I mean, if we're lucky, it'll be next update. Same principles here with the firewall panel on the driver's side. Like this is, you know, just removable. So when there's foot controls in here, you know, let's put this guy back if I can do it one-handed. So when the foot controls are in here, I think what we're gonna do is a pedal box, especially because we're using a clutch pedal, but it'll need to be hanging. And you know, once this dash fills in and the seats are in, the upholstery is in, this is gonna be the ticket right here for serviceability. And you know, does it seal? Absolutely, especially with like some, you know, like foam, like dense foam weather strip or backing on this stuff and some hardware. That'll just tighten right up and you don't have to worry about anything. I think what we should cover, go through here really quick and just see if we have any odds and ends that we want to talk about before we get, you can see the spare in there now. So it's a full size 37. This tin work here, where that back wall is, that's just in place, but that's gonna be a transparent window. And I think that's what's gonna bring us into the talk of the door openings and what we have going on. So I'm gonna grab Joey. Vision here is function first. So obviously, like the shock mounts are a focal point. The rear door is not occupied by, you know, needing to be used for like occupant getting in and out. The shocks just fill out this whole door. But what we still need to like press on is we need to press on sealing the cabin up for like A pillar, B pillar, and back to the back wall. Like I talked about, it's not just like a straight from the B pillar, it's not just behind the seats wall. It has like spatial presence back there where it's not just this like thing behind you, like a Lamborghini or something. So there's a lot of space there, and like from the start, I'm like, I want it to have windows. I want you to be able to see through. You open up the back door and there's like these portal windows that go in, and they're transparent, and you can see like the backs, like the carbon back seats, and you can see like the upholstery back there, like fire suppression or something, just like a detail. And not so much just for the visual of that, but also because when you're in there, you want there to be like light openings. You don't just want, you know, like the windscreen and the front doors or the front windows. Like you want like the thing to be spatially like aired out, and it'll just make it feel bigger and more comfortable like that instead of this tiny little coupe. And I think that's great for maybe a race application, but for really feeling like something that's a super hyper performance car, you want like luxury, and you want like a feeling of just spatial feeling. So tying all that together, we're like, we need to seal this thing. We need to stylize portal windows, and we need to like be able to functionally take care of the shocks. So that's like a lot of what this is. There's trim here. This blue piece, this is an intermediate panel. And just like the Bronco, this has optic armor going in. It's a 1/4 inch thick. It's transparent sheet. It doesn't scratch like Lexan would, and it doesn't crack or fracture. So this is the same sheet all the way from like the chassis. It spans all the way up. You see the upper one and the lower one. And you know, this is not finished yet, but this is all gonna be see-through. So you'll open this door, you know, like the window will be here. The window is not gonna be a window that goes up and down, just because the wheel opening is so much greater than the actual, like what the window needs in the door. So you'll open the door, you know, it'll look complete, like you won't even notice that this is missing, and this will get finished out too, where it's boxed into the chassis. And this is the same thing. This is gonna live here like this. And it'll be awesome for servicing the shocks, but it'll also be an awesome detail where like, you know, everything kind of flows into this thing and opens it. It's not just like this closed thing. So you open the door, focal point is the shocks. You see portal windows, you can see through there. And then when you're sitting in the car, same thing. You can like look over your shoulder and you can see out. You can see through here, and you can also see down here and see some of the shocks. You know, the other thing here is this is gonna be a paddle tire car for a lot of the time it gets used. So what's gonna happen is there's gonna be a violent amount of sand that gets slung into this cavity from the paddles. This is a drain port, so this mesh is just an extraction for sand when it starts to pile up in here, because it'll probably get to a point where it's that deep, just from shooting in. Maybe, that might be exaggerated. So this has been something I've been walking through with Colin. This is something I was anticipating doing. I've been like holding this sheet in my hand. This is what it starts with. Even this shock mount, we had this thing in here, and I would just start, like, I started sketching. We had the shock mount. We knew where the coordinates were for the coilover and the bypass, and we had them tacked in there, and then we just put this thing in here, and I just started to like figure out flow, you know, and started chunking out stuff like what would make sense and doing all that. And literally it starts with that, and then it turns into that, and it's the same thing. Like we had this panel on here, you know, and I like needed to figure out, like the Zeus buttons play a big role, like where those need to work. And then I'd start to like figure out, like I'd look at the shapes and draw through like what feels right for the rest of this thing, you know, and make sure that there's not like this disconnect where this shape doesn't work with the shock mount or vice versa. And that's why I say, you guys, I'm gonna get this going where we're gonna go so deep on like our shop process. And like I said, it's not going to be something where I'm like full instructional. It's just, you guys are going to be right with us, catching all of our dialogue from this phase, you know, of like mocking the stuff up to all the way where we're drawing the stuff in to where you're seeing it get refined. Every time I have a dialogue with Colin or Alex, you're going to be right there with us, and you're going to be able to follow this like insane, just all the way. So that's how this starts. If you want to know what this is, by the way, this is chipboard. It's, you know, you can call it template paper, but it's chipboard. We get this at papermart.com. This is 042 thickness. I hate saying that because I'm always afraid that they're gonna run out somehow, and then we're gonna have to like go back to the drawing board on chipboard. But this has been a big process. The other thing here is like the pickups for this. This is what, like, we knew we didn't need to have the weather strip for the seal for the door in here, because the seal portion of this comes from only needing to be the inside. The door is not really relevant to sealing the back of this thing. So we capitalized on this pinch seam. And we thought, all right, well, let's make this, when you open the door, it's like this experience, like, whoa, and you see shocks, and the shock mount is like growing out of the sheet metal. And then it's open back here because all of the air is blowing back in there. And then there's viewing windows, and it's like just this thing living back here. And that's been the last few weeks of work. I want to say progress on this thing right now is 21 weeks total, including me welding. That's all of the fabrication. So that's like, we've been keeping pretty good tabs on it because it's really easy when someone's consistently working on this thing. You know. So got this side solidified, and this side is matching now. So obviously you don't get the cool blue stuff in here. What we'll do with that is we'll swap that out. This is our window, right? So this thing's just kind of floating in here. It's not buttoned all the way or tight. And these bevels will go and they'll close out this is 90 thou thick. So once we put a 1/4 inch in here, it's gonna be very pressurized onto these panels. And that's gonna kind of act as a seal. But that's what we needed is, like I was saying, we played off of the door sill because this is 3 layers, and it's very thick because this is an aluminum shell. So there's actually 2 1/8 inch layers here, and then what looks to be like a 18 gauge or a 20 gauge layer, all pinched together and then riveted like with these solid rivets. So we went adjacent to the rivet holes, so we didn't have to drill those out. So there's still the seam grip together, and then we just plugged everything in between there with our hardware. So this thing can come off, and then, you know, everything else comes out, but it is removable. But it's something, when it goes in, it's gonna help seal the car. With that, you can stand here, Joey, and I'll kind of go in and explain the rest of this. So this is where we stand right now. This is that blue panel that we were talking about. This one's a little tighter, but again, everything is like removable. You couldn't even build a wall here because, like we talked about with the fuel cell cradle, it requires all the space. It goes inboard of this tube right up to the shock mount to take the fuel cell out. So the next phase here is like, there's the plastic OEM trim that we talked about fits all in this area. And then what we're gonna build out is another trim piece that comes out here, runs on this line, this indicator line here. So it's spanned away from this window enough where we're gonna do another bezel, and the bezel will match up right at the outside bezel. So when you look from in here, it'll just be a perfect seam where they come together, and you won't see the outside one, and vice versa. So it'll just be like a viewing window, and it'll still have depth. The one thing we want to stray away from is just doing some basic bullshit panel with a window where it's like we ran some kind of flat panel and then we just did like a step roll and then bolted the window in. That's not what we want. This wants to look like a factory trim situation in here because there's so much factory trim from the B pillar forward that it only makes sense to match it. So that's what's going on. There's gonna be big, same deal as the outside. It'll be big trim piece in here. bonds right into the B-pillar OEM panel. And then there's bezeled windows. So you'll have a window something like that. Something like that. Those will live there. This piece you see here, this is the next one of these. This is the rear window. It is bonded right into where the moonroof for the front ends, and this is also acting as a as the ducting we talked about. So there's like, I'll hold the camera up here, and this is also like the waterfall effect of like a negative ducting going in here. So this will all be window. We'll leave these tubes exposed. I like that detail where we're not just building a wall right here. Again, that's the thing to stray away from, is like your typical brain just goes, all right, panel, pink, pink, close out, and it takes away from all the dimension. And you don't have any like depth or anything in here. So really, like, this is gonna be awesome because there'll be this back shelf. There's another panel that goes here that'll all be welded in. That'll kind of have a contour to really express, like, even if this is upholstered, it'll still express that that's where the spare is. And it's perfectly centered in here. So you'll have like a little bit of radius here. And then these guys won't have any view windows. So you'll have your portal windows here. It'll go just upholstered, and then it'll be right up to here with a full view window back here. And it'll be cool because you'll see the top of the spare, and then you'll see outside, because really if you're looking from this angle, you'll see like out of the inlet for the air up there. So this really acts as our seal. There's 3 layers of seal for the cab here to keep the dust out. This one's gonna be pressurized. And what I mean by pressurized is like you have cabin pressure kind of thing with an airplane, and for off-road, what it is there's atmospheric pressure and then there's cabin pressure. And so as long as your cabin pressure is higher than your atmospheric pressure, the dust can't get in. And that's the whole point with this thing, is you wanna be able to drive this thing through any condition, any dust, and nothing gets into the cab. You just have your windows up, AC's on, good filtration system, and it's perfect in here at all times. And so that's what we're going for. This moonroof is gonna be here. It's not gonna be functional with sliders, but it's just gonna be glued in. So when you look up here, you'll have all this cage, and then you'll have transparent glass all through here. And it should be beautiful in here. It should literally be like some kind of exotic, like a supercar feeling with the seats and all the plush interior. And then you can kind of see through. So you'll like look through here and you'll see shocks. You know, and same with the back. Like this will act as your air dam too. So like this will be active, and you'll just look back there and it'll be wide open, like just very open, I guess. Man, I feel like I'm repeating the shit out of this stuff. So right now, this is the process. This is kind of where we stand. This trim area is the next thing to close out. This middle thing is the next thing to close out. On the other end of this, Igor's doing the front cooler for us. I am also designing we need to talk about the back. I'm also designing the suspension components. So the lower arms, the upper arms, the uprights, and the rear trailing arms are all gonna be these insane billet pieces. We put some good time and energy into the design on the exotic Prerunner upper arms, and they were in really good shape, but now we're at this point with these, it's gonna look insane, and it's gonna be very similar to the styling that this car already has with the shock mounts in this opening. So it would be a direct match. Like you put these arms on here, and they're all 70-75 aluminum, and they'll really tie into the same design language. So that's been my thing at night. Like I've been going home, and then I just, you know, make a cup of coffee, and then for hours I just go up and draw these things every single day until they're done. So we're getting closer. We have some serious deadlines with shows coming up for this thing, so really it falls on me to finish that stuff. And then Joe, who's doing all of the digital modeling work on this car, is gonna have to translate my drawings into a SolidWorks file, and then we need to machine them. While we're talking about machining, we need to go talk about the engineering. So we'll do that now. Okay, so a couple 3D printed parts right now. This is a flywheel adapt. Well, a flywheel adapter plate. This takes all the Lamborghini stuff and it turns it into a GM clutch and flywheel, which is the largest you can get. The whole bell housing on this thing, so from the engine to the gearbox, there's a bell housing. We need to have an adapter made and like a mid plate made all in one for that. We've been working with Weddle on that, and Joe's been kind of just going through all the motions to make sure we have everything where the Lambo motor can mate up to the Albin's gearbox and everything works. And that's one thing to expect that's ready for machining. This is a alternator bracket. This guy goes in here. This will mount a DC power billet alternator. So that's one. Those guys are done. Then the next step is, okay, well now we need a power steering solution billet pump, like a TT pump. We had some ideas before about that, where we're gonna put it, and now what's turned into is getting that thing nestled up high here on its own drive system. So it'll run another pulley off of this guy, be 2 tensioners, and then it'll have like a billet plate that'll hold this thing. While we're doing that, we decided to have like another rear mount. This is just a temporary mount, like a saddle mount on the tubes to kind of hold the engine safe, but it needs something fixed. So we're gonna have a big billet cross section, all styled and shaped in here, that's machined, that'll bolt. It'll have like weld on areas here that'll be like bolt returns or registers. And then this will drop down and it'll triangulate this area, and it'll also pick up on the engine. And then it'll have another appendage that has the power steering pump here. So I know that's a lot to take in. The best thing to do is talk about it now, and then, you know, once this stuff is a proof of concept, I'll show you guys. This kind of closes out the Dakar update. If you have questions or comments, usually pretty good about answering those things, feel free to reach out. I hope you guys are enjoying this thing. Like, comment, subscribe. Have a good day.